Hello, I'm Robert Ellsberg. I'm the publisher of Orbis Books, and I am joined today by two authors who've collaborated on an extraordinary book. One of them you can see, and that's Chris Pramuk, whose image appears here. And for technical reasons, William Hart McNichols will remain a man of mystery, though he apparently can see us, and he insisted that the show go on, even though we can't see him. So those of you who are listening to this, the audio version of this, you're not missing quite as much, though I do hope to show some images. So I hope you will look at the YouTube video when that is posted. First of all, we're talking about this book here, All My Eyes See, The Artistic Vocation of Fr.William Hart McNichols. And this is it's such a beautiful book that it's really hard to describe, but it is a conversation between Father Bill McNichols, who's well known as one of the great iconographers of our time, but there's a lot more to him and his story, and his friend Chris Pramuk, who's a lay theologian who teaches theology at Regis College in Denver, and is the author of a number of books, including a couple of my favorite books about Thomas Merton. He and Father Bill are very good friends, and they've collaborated on this book, which is really, it's not really an art book exactly, and it's not really a memoir, but it really is a kind of guided journey that the two of them share that allows Father Bill to describe how his vocations as an artist and as a priest, which are rooted very early in his life, have converged. And the story of his art as a kind of expression of his spirituality, his spiritual life, that proceeded for many years before he turned to icons, studying with the great modern iconographer, Brother Robert Lentz. I should say, I'll just read from the biography here of Father Bill that's on the back. Ordained in 1979, Father William Hart McNichols was a member of the Society of Jesus from 1968 to 2002. He received a Master of Fine Arts from Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. From 1983 to 1990, he worked in AIDS hospice ministry in Manhattan. He moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico in 1990 to study with Robert Lentz, and continues to live in Albuquerque as a priest of the Archdiocese. That hardly says it, but that just thumbnail. I'm going to share here on screen some pages from the book, first of all. I think you can see that. So you'll just get a sense of visually of what this book is like. This is from one of the last chapters. And you'll see in red there are Chris's questions and then Bill's reflections and comments interspersed throughout with photographs and full color images from his extraordinary work. I'm not pausing here, but just to give you, I wanted to give you a flavor of what this book looks like. This is the image on the left there that is on the cover of the book. That shows Bill celebrating Mass with one of his extraordinary icons blown up behind him. This is just a little sample of what you'll see inside. Here's one of his kind of self-portraits with all kinds of symbols and images on the margins that refer to aspects of his life. Here is one of his more recent icons of Thomas Merton celebrating Mass, and an older image of Thomas Merton. Some of his other images and icons of non-conventional saints, like Mary Dyer, the Quaker martyr on the right there, or here Saint Kateri Tekakwitha. I'm going to close this because we'll look some more at some of his art as we go along. So Bill can see what we're seeing with all his eyes see, as the title says. But I want to start with Chris to ask you if you would kind of, in your own words, say what this project is, what this book is about, and how it came about, what you envisioned for it.
Sure. Yeah, well, it's great to be with you, Robert. And I would begin just by thanking you and Orbis for a tremendous. I'm so happy with the layout, the images. I think you all your team did an amazing job with the book. Bill and I became friends some 15 years ago. I was I was aware of his art, but to me, I wasn't raised with iconography. And so Bill became kind of a mentor and teacher to me in visual art, and particularly Eastern Orthodox iconography, the tradition that he was trained in with Robert Lentz. Um, Over time, our friendship deepened and developed, and we tell the story in the book of kind of how the book, the genesis, how it came about. Some years after Bill had a serious medical incident, and he just really yearned to get some of his work, some more of it out. He felt called by God to say, particularly some of the works that folks aren't familiar with, and the story that preceded, his years as an iconographer. So that means a lot of his illustrations and paintings during his years as a young Jesuit, when he was illustrating children's books. This was a whole kind of part of his journey that I didn't know a lot about. And as I began to kind of learn more, and he would share with me these images, I just yearned to know the kind of the story behind them, the spirituality out of which Bill, in his journey as an artist, used art to touch people. During his AIDS ministry in the 1980s, there are some really striking drawings that came out of that period. I guess uh, I would just say, as a musician myself, a lifelong musician, I've always felt deeply, moved by music and the arts as a vehicle for drawing near to God, for spirituality in my own life. Um, but the visual arts kind of came late for me. And Bill has been my primary kind of teacher in the way of prayer through images. So, our hope for the book, I think, as we talked about it, explored how to go about it, was to really unfold a kind of a narrative dimension, a story, by
Mhm.
way of conversation between us, and to accompany that conversation with his art from childhood. The first image in the book is from age 5 all the way up to the present. Right at publication deadline, as you know, Robert, we were asking to put in some of the more recent work. So, yeah, it's been an amazing, really couple year process to see this book come into fruition.
Well, in the case of many artists, you could say their work kind of speaks for itself. But when you see it all laid out chronologically and thematically through his life, you really get a sense in this book of how much what he sees and what he paints is deeply rooted in his own spiritual life and journey. Uh, and Bill, I'm going to ask you maybe to talk a little bit about that kind of early impulse that you had to be an artist, and how very early on that was connected with your own kind of spiritual journey.
Yeah. I want to say too, with Chris, or to both of you, you're both mean so much to me, and to have two of my best friends bring out some of this work is really more of a gift than I can say, and that's what you're getting with the book too. You're getting Robert and Chris and my pictures, and some things I say And as I listen to you, I, it's funny. I did not make a distinction between art and the real person.
Mhm.
I mean, from very little, from like 3 or 4 or 5. When I saw a window, a stained glass window of Saint Agnes holding the Lamb, I immediately shot to Saint Agnes. I didn't
Mhm.
think, oh, that's a window, Then I went home and read about her in my little lives of the saints and saw other pictures of her, and that's just one example. Now in my own church in Denver, Christ the King, they didn't have any windows.
Mhm.
It was a World War II church with the just yellow windows. But when I go to other churches, especially the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception in Denver, I would just be caught up in the art. And I don't know that I heard too much of what was being said. I like the music, I like the art, but relating to certain saints, like in the cathedral, there's a window of Saint Augustine,
Mhm.
and below him is this little child with a seashell, and that's a story from his own life, where he. So I'd look up at that and I'd say, what's that kid doing with the seashell? And I go home and I found out that Augustine was trying to figure out the Trinity, and he's walking up and down the beach.
Mhm.
And there was a little child taking water from the ocean, and she dug a little hole. And he said, "What are you doing?" And she said, I'm putting the ocean in the hole." And he said, "Well, that's impossible." And she said, "And it's impossible for you to figure out the Trinity," and vanished.
An angelic
So those,
child.
yeah, yeah, it was an angel trying to say, you know, you can't you can't approach this with your mind.
Mhm.
And so different stories like that. Also, I wasn't really connected to being different or being born different. I knew I didn't have a place in this world,
Mhm.
uh, from grade school all through high school. So I
Mhm.
spent a lot of time with what Peter Brown calls in his book, which has a terrible title, but it's a beautiful book, The Cult of the Saints.
Mhm.
Now, if he had named it any other name but cult, it would be probably flying off the shelves. But in The Cult of the Saints, he has a whole chapter called Invisible Friends, and a whole chapter about how people begin to honor the saints. And it came through the martyrs, really. The Christians would go to the cemeteries and have mass on top of the graves, and the Romans were horrified
Mhm.
because they felt that the graveyards were unclean places. And there's all these weird people doing God knows what on top of the grave. But they would also bring children who were sick or who had, medical problems, and lay them on top of the grave and they'd be healed.
Mhm.
So Peter Brown said a, a kind of a channel, or what do they call it today? When they say a place has um, a vibration or something like that. I
Yeah.
forget what.
A thin place.
Yeah, it's more like Sedona or something,
Yeah, right.
There's a word that people use often. This place is it's not a magnet, but it's a portal.
Mhm.
Okay, so Peter Brown said a portal was opened at that grave, and the saints were alive. They were coming down and
Mhm.
healing these people. And
Mhm.
he quotes some philosopher saying, nobody even knows anymore the name of the great philosophers. Now everybody's in love with these saints, and they were nothing. But they heal people, and they are alive with them, and that's why a lot of the early altars look like tombs, like Roman tombs.
That kind of idea of the saint as a kind of locus of kind of sacred power or energy, is very much in the origin of the saints that Peter Brown writes about. But it occurs to me that unlike a lot of religious art, which depicts some kind of religious story or mystery, icons have that kind of function, don't they, in some way, as a kind of not calling attention to themselves, but as a kind of a window or a passageway to some other kind of eternal reality or mystery. Is that you think that's true?
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Icons are for the purpose of you. So if I do an icon of Robert Sethel, or if I do an icon of something that has not a copy, let's say you showed Our Lady of Yaroslav in the book, and so I copy that icon, which doesn't look at all like the real Mary or the real Jesus, and the reason that you can access them through that icon is that they don't look anything like we think the real people looked. So they become like a symbol of the people. And whether your Mary looks like that one or not, you feel that it is Mary because it's more like a cartoon. That's probably a bad word to use, but it's symbolic of Mary. And you really do, yeah. Oh, there's
I'm
Sister
just
Wendy.
calling up a couple of things here just to, while since they can't see you anyway, might as well look at some images while you're talking.
Yeah, Our Lady of the Sandias and Christ of the Sandias. Now, if you look at Our Lady of the Sandias, if Mary stood up, she'd be about 12 feet tall. And if Christ stood up, he'd be about 7 feet. So they're distorted on purpose in a way, and the beauty of them, it's almost like, I mean, that icon in particular is almost like a ballet to me. It is so it's a copy of the Kiko icon of Our Lady of that is from Mount Athos, but the one that I copied by Simon Ushakov is magnificent. It's just beautiful, but everything is elongated. And for instance, everybody always says, did El Greco have an astigmatism? Well, no, he was an iconographer from Crete. And when he moved to Toledo, he did electrocuted icons, is what I call his work, And it's clear to me that he was an iconographer when I look at his work. They keep on about this astigmatism. All they'd have to do is look at Our Lady of the Sandias, and they could see why El Greco elongates things. And yeah, when you look at Christ of this, that Christ is coming out of the winter, and it's really a resurrection icon. And he is coming forth to you, bearing the first thing in Albuquerque, bearing a cottonwood branch that's just about to bloom. And he's coming forth out of the snow, and the sandias are in the background covered in snow. So that really is probably one of my favorite Christs that I've ever been able to do. And both of those icons I just love because they're about living here,
Let me ask you about something else. One of the, the big themes in your work and in your life is your formation with the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. And although you ultimately left the Jesuits, the uh, the influence of Ignatian spirituality runs very deep in you, and certainly not something you've left behind. And one of the themes in a lot of your work here are, Ignatius and two Jesuit saints. I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that. What is how Ignatian spirituality has formed you and maybe influenced your vocation as an artist?
Oh boy. Yeah, I think well, art was always important to me without me even knowing. It was when I was little, it was called drawing and coloring. So I draw. When my brother came to visit me in Albuquerque, and he came in the house and I was painting, and he goes, "Oh, I see you're still in your room drawing and coloring." Like I had been most of my life. Um, and honestly, I tried to leave. I did leave, and I tried to stay leaving or to stay out, but God would not have it, and He connected me to the Jesuits in such a strong way that I don't even feel like I'm gone anymore, because I left December 16th, 2002, right after Phil Berrigan died. I got home from his funeral and then ended up signing out, is what they call it. And I was never given final vows, so it goes through really fast. It's like I was engaged for 35 years, but then not married. And that August, Ignatius came to me in a dream and stood there, and I knew it was him because he was short and he had his cape on, he had his cassock on, and he didn't say a word. And he was glowing, really glowing, and not just had a smile, but an intent look right into me that said to me, "You're not going anywhere, and I'm not going anywhere." And I woke up and I knew it wasn't really a dream. I knew it was real. And I thought, what does this mean? So what it meant for me was, when you're a Jesuit, when I entered at 19, immediately, I mean, that chapel at Florissant had all the Jesuit saints, and I love those windows. There was Paul Miki, there was Isaac Jogues, there was just everybody. And as I'm looking at them, I'm saying, this is my family. Mm-hmm. And they really are. Like Aloysius, when you're a Jesuit, Aloysius is really your brother. Or Robert Southwell, or Teilhard. They really are. They really are your ancestors. And you feel that. And when I left, that was the most heartbreaking part about it for me, was I thought, how am I going to be connected to Stanislas anymore, or to Julien Monoir, or any of the Jesuits that I've loved? And that dream really said, you're not, that part of is not gone. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In some mysterious way. And then I got so many, as I was leaving, I was doing an icon for Canada of Bernard Lonergan. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I did that triptych for Omaha. So I was doing all these Jesuit icons as as I was leaving, so I wasn't allowed to even leave. You know what I mean? In my mind, in my heart. So I think it was kind of like I don't. Just the other day, I was trying to pray to God, and I said, "No, what is this about? How am I in but not really in? You know?" And I haven't gotten an answer yet. So there is Ignatius. I did
Yeah.
that for 1991. Archbishop Cardinal now Stafford wanted to celebrate the Ignatian year, and he asked me to do something for a holy card. So at that time, I was very fluent in color pencil, and I did a color pencil drawing of Ignatius praying in Rome. And what struck me always about him, was that he didn't have to go into a room alone, or he didn't have to be, have all these perfect conditions for prayer. He was praying smack in the middle of Rome,
Mm.
And that's what I wanted to convey. And then in the picture on the right, that is called a deposition painting. A deposition painting is Christ being taken down from the cross. And they're very famous. A lot of artists like Pontormo have done deposition paintings. And that was 1974 or 75 when I was leaving teaching at Regis High School. And I was thinking a lot about Holy Saturday. And Holy Saturday has always been very meaningful for me, the day that Christ was dead. Or theologians would say the day he descended into hell,
Mhm.
So I have the eclipse sun above, and then I put Father Arupe's. Father Arupe is that most every Jesuit really thought he was the reincarnation of Ignatius, and everybody loved him. Well, most people did. A lot of people didn't. But anyway, he's taking Christ down from the cross, and I put him in tights and a shirt so that you could feel the weight. You could see his legs bending. And then stripes have always meant Isaiah to me. By his stripes we are healed. So he's bearing Christ, and I showed it one time in a PowerPoint show or a slideshow. Maybe it was that long ago when I did slideshows, and I said, he's bearing Christ and he's taking him down from the cross, but Christ is dead. And a woman raised her hand and she goes, "Father Bill, did you notice that Jesus is actually kissing Father Arupe's head?"
Yeah.
And I said, "No, I never
I didn't
did.
see that.
I never noticed that." So even that made the painting even more meaningful for me. The fact that Christ is dead, but he's still kissing his head, and then the eclipse sun on the top.
Could I switch from here? Because we actually only have a few minutes left. It's gone very quickly. I don't want to miss talking about, I think, a very important time in your life when your vocations as an artist and a priest kind of converged in a new way, and that was during your AIDS ministry in New York City. And I'm just going to bring up a couple of the images that come out of that time there, and maybe you could talk a little bit about what that was all about, and how you responded to that, both in your ministry and in your art.
Yeah, that picture is fairly large. I forget exactly how large it is, but it's in watercolor and gouache. Gouache is an opaque watercolor, and it's very hard to make flat. So when you make it flat, it almost looks like a silk screen.
Mm.
And I was fluent in gouache and watercolor as well as color pencil before I even began to do icons. I mean, fluent meaning you spend so much time doing it that you can bring that up, quickly. And during the time, I wanted to do something for the hospice office about people with AIDS. And I didn't want, that picture was not done for people with AIDS because there's so much suffering in it. And they don't need to see that. That's what I thought. But it was done for anybody walking in that office. And at that time, there was so much prejudice and anger and just disgust around, AIDS. Reagan did not say the word till 1986, and John Paul didn't say the word until 1987. I learned that from Michael O'Loughlin.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted something that would say a lot. And I wanted to do a Mary that wasn't white. So it's not Fatima, it's not Lourdes, and it's not Knock. She's not all in white. She's, it's Our Lady of Guadalupe, and she's dressed in salmon color inside, and then this beautiful turquoise cloak that everybody knows her for. And she's got the Santo Niño, the Holy Child, on her lap. And he's just like one of those kids that jumps out of the mother's lap, or pulls things when you take him to the grocery store, will pull things off the shelf, and you have to pull him back into the. So he's reaching out to this guy on the left whose name was Robert. And Francis is holding him, and he wants to jump out of Mary's lap right into Robert's. And that was my idea was the child does not know, children don't know prejudice, they don't know who you are. And if they see something in you, they'll reach out, they want to be held. So above St. Francis is wishbones, which are a symbol for me of hope, and the crown of thorns, which is suffering. So hope coming out of suffering. And on the right-hand side is another guy named Jay being held by Aloysius. And Jay was a straight man who had gotten AIDS through needles, IV drug use. And those were the first two people I met when I began my ministry. So I wanted to honor them. And Jay had Kaposi sarcoma, which are the purple spots all over his body. And I put Aloysius and Francis became my patrons, and Our Lady of Guadalupe. So I put them all three together. And Aloysius was always known for purity during his life. So I have the lilies, symbolic of purity, but fire around them. And that's kind of saying any kind of purity, whether you're talking about physical or purity of soul or purity of heart or purity of mind, comes through fire. You have to get there. A lot has to happen for you to attain that, So anyway, Aloysius is carrying him to Mary, and they're all on water, and there's little vigilites bobbing up and down on the water. And the rainbow throne from Revelation, that wasn't, at that time, the rainbow had nothing to do with gay people at that time. I forget when the rainbow became popular, but I put it behind them because of the book of Revelation. And I love I love Porgy and Bess. You know, I listen to it every summer. I listen to it. It's my summer music. And there's a song in it called Clara, Clara. And I thought of that song when I was painting this. Clara, Clara, her husband died, and it's at the funeral. Don't you be downhearted, Clara. Don't you be sad and lonesome. Jesus is walking across the water. Rise up and follow him home. So that's why I put the vigil lights on the water. And at every funeral, we always say, carry this person over the waters of death, you know.
Bill,
So
I have to jump in because believe it or not, we're really almost down to the last minute.
yeah,
I'm just going to show a couple of images here. I don't want to run out of time. This one really had a big impact, and it's still very, very strong image of Jesus on the cross with instead of saying King of the Jews, it says AIDS, homosexual, faggot, pervert, sodomite, the shaming of people who were suffering that passion of AIDS at the time, but the identification of their suffering with the passion of Christ. I'm just going to put something else so we end on a happier note, maybe. But again, two things that mean a lot to me, because you gave me this image of Sister Wendy, and she wrote beautifully about your John the Baptist. We're going to be cut off in a minute, so I'm just going to say everybody's got to read this book. It's not just for the art, but for the story of the person behind it. And I'm so grateful to Chris for your fantastic genius in bringing this out of Bill. And thank you, Bill, so much for what you've shared, not just today, but through all of your work and your life. Thank you both very much.
Thank you both for being my friend.